The moment Lila Hayes stepped off that plane in Rome, she had 48 hours left as a free woman. She just didn't know it yet. What started as a daughter's desperate attempt to save her father's failing business ended with her signing away her life to one of the most dangerous men in Italy. No escape, no second chances, just a cold arrangement that would strip everything she thought she knew about survival, power, and the thin line between captivity and something far more dangerous. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey goes. The cab smelled like cigarettes and cheap cologne, and Lila Hayes pressed her forehead against the window, watching Rome blur past in streaks of terracotta and gold. 24 hours ago, she'd been in a Chicago coffee shop, nursing her second latte and pretending her finance degree meant something. Now she was here, halfway across the world, because her father had called with that voice, the one that meant things had gone from bad to catastrophic. Lila, I need you. 4 words. That's all it took. She hadn't asked the right questions, hadn't demanded details, just heard the tremor buried under his attempt at calm and bought a one-way ticket with the last bit of credit she had left. Because that's what you did when your father's voice cracked like that. You showed up. The cab driver said something in rapid Italian, gesturing toward a hillside villa that rose from the countryside like something out of a painting. White stone, cypress trees, iron gates that looked like they belonged to a fortress. Lila's stomach twisted. This is it? Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. See? The driver nodded, already pulling her suitcase from the trunk. She paid him with euros her father had wired, her hands shaking just enough to make the bills flutter. The cab pulled away, leaving her standing in front of those gates with nothing but a carry-on and a growing sense that she'd made a terrible mistake. The intercom crackled before she could reach for it. Lila Hayes. Not a question, a statement, male voice, accent thick but controlled. Yes, I'm here to see. The gate swung open. She walked through because what else was she going to do? Turn around, run. The driveway curved upward, gravel crunching under her sneakers, and with each step the villa grew larger, more imposing. Whoever owned this place had money, real money, the kind that made her father's business opportunity sound even more suspicious than it already did. A man waited at the entrance, tall, broad-shouldered, maybe 40, with the kind of face that had seen things and decided not to talk about them. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her semester's tuition. Miss Hayes. He didn't offer his hand. Your father is inside. Where's inside? Follow me. She did, because the alternative was standing there like an idiot. The villa's interior matched its exterior, old-world elegance with an edge of something harder. Marble floors, dark wood, artwork that looked original. But there were cameras in the corners. Discreet, but there. And the windows had bars worked into decorative ironwork that didn't feel decorative at all. They walked through a corridor that opened into a study. And there was her father. Richard Hayes sat in a leather chair that swallowed him, his usually neat hair disheveled, his tie loose. He looked like he'd aged a decade since she'd seen him at Christmas. When he saw her, something in his face crumpled. Lila. He stood, and she saw his hands were shaking. You shouldn't have come. You called me. She moved toward him, confusion giving way to alarm. Dad, what's going on? You said you needed help with the business, that there was an opportunity. I lied. The words hit like a slap. What? I lied to get you here. His voice broke. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. There was no other way. The door behind her closed, not slammed, just a quiet, final click. Lila spun around. The man who'd escorted her was gone, but someone else stood in his place. Older, maybe mid-50s, with silver threading through dark hair and eyes that took her apart in a single glance. He wore a suit too, but he wore it differently, like armor he'd been born in. Miss Hayes. His English was perfect, barely touched by accent. I'm Vittorio De Luca. The name meant nothing to her. Should it have? I don't understand what's happening. She looked between him and her father, panic starting to claw up her throat. Dad, who is this? Why did you lie to me? Richard wouldn't meet her eyes. Vittorio moved into the room with the kind of measured grace that made her think of predators. He went to a bar cart, poured 2 glasses of whiskey, and handed one to her father. Richard took it with shaking hands and drank it like medicine. Your father, Vittorio said, settling into the chair behind an enormous desk, owes me a considerable amount of money. What? Lila's voice pitched higher. How much? $2 million. The number didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. Her father ran a small import business. He barely made 6 figures a year. $2 million was... That's impossible. I assure you it's not. Vittorio steepled his fingers. He came to me 3 years ago, needed capital to expand. I provided it, generously, with clear terms. Then take it up with him. Lila's fear was burning into anger now. Why am I here? Because he can't pay. So sue him. Isn't that what people do? Vittorio's expression didn't change. I don't sue, Miss Hayes. Something in the way he said it made her blood go cold. Dad? She turned back to her father. Dad, what did you do? Richard finally looked at her, and his eyes were wet. I gambled it away, most of it. The rest went into bad investments, trying to win it back. I thought I could fix it before anyone knew, before you knew. His voice cracked. I'm sorry, Lila. I'm so goddamn sorry. Sorry? The word came out sharp. You dragged me to Italy to tell me you're sorry? I dragged you here, Richard said, and now he was crying. Because it was the only way to save my life. Lila's heart stopped. Mr. DeLuca doesn't sue, her father continued. He makes examples, and I was going to be one until I offered him something else. What? But even as she asked, she knew. Knew in the way her stomach dropped and the room tilted. No, you're young, Richard said. Beautiful, smart, everything he's looking for. Looking for what? She backed toward the door. What are you talking about? Vittorio stood. A wife? The room went silent except for the blood rushing in Lila's ears. You're insane. She reached for the door handle, locked. Let me out. Sit down, Miss Hayes. Fuck you. She yanked at the handle. Let me out right now or I'll... You'll what? Vittorio's voice didn't rise. Didn't need to. Scream? Run? Call the police? He moved closer, and she pressed her back against the door. You're in my home, in my country, on my land. The local police chief had dinner with me last week. Please, enlighten me. What exactly will you do? This is kidnapping. Your father brought you here willingly, under false pretenses. A family matter. He tilted his head. Hardly criminal. I'll tell the embassy. You'll discover that international incidents require evidence, time, and a bureaucratic process that moves slower than you can imagine. He was close enough now that she could see the fine lines around his eyes. By the time anyone investigates, you'll have been here for months, married, living as my wife. And when they ask if you were forced, I wonder what you'll say. The truth, will you? Something flickered in his expression. Even knowing that your father's life depends on your cooperation? Her throat closed. Vittorio stepped back, giving her space she didn't want. Sit down. Let's discuss this like adults. I'm 19. Old enough to make decisions. Not this one. Unfortunately, this decision has already been made. He returned to his desk. Your father offered you in exchange for his debt. I accepted. Now we're simply working out the details. Lila looked at her father, who'd collapsed back into his chair, head in his hands. How could you? I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. Not when they send you pictures of your daughter walking to class. Richard's head snapped up. Not when they know her schedule, her address, her friends' names. Not when they make it clear that if I don't pay, they'll make you pay instead. His voice broke again. At least this way you're alive. You're safe. Safe? Lila laughed, and it came out jagged. You call this safe? Safer than the alternative. Vittorio cleared his throat. If we're finished with the family drama, we have practical matters to discuss. I'm not marrying you. Lila forced the words out. I don't care what you threaten. I won't do it. Then your father dies tonight. Vittorio said it like he was commenting on the weather. Slowly, painfully, and you'll watch. You're bluffing. Am I? He picked up his phone, pressed a button. Marco, bring the equipment to the study. Wait. Richard lurched forward. Please, Mr. DeLuca, please. She just needs time to understand. She understands perfectly. Vittorio's eyes stayed on Lila. She simply thinks I'm not serious. The door opened. The same man who'd escorted her inside entered, carrying a leather case. He set it on the desk without a word and left. Vittorio opened it. Lila didn't know what half the things inside were, but she recognized enough. Pliers, knives, things that gleamed in the afternoon light streaming through the windows. Last chance, Miss Hayes. Vittorio's voice remained calm. Agree to the arrangement, or we proceed with the original plan. Don't. Her father was on his knees now, actually on his knees. Lila, please, please, baby, just say yes. You can hate me forever, but please say yes. She wanted to tell him to go to hell, wanted to spit in Vittorio's face and dare him to follow through. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was, what would I have to do? Vittorio closed the case. Marry me. Live here as my wife. Fulfill the duties that entails. What duties? Companionship, appearances, eventually children. The floor felt unsteady. You want me to have your children. I want an heir. You're young, healthy, intelligent, suitable. Suitable. She repeated the word like it belonged to a language she didn't speak. I'm a person, not a breeding mare. You're a transaction. His bluntness was somehow worse than cruelty. Your father's life for your cooperation. Those are the terms. And if I say no? Then we're done talking. She looked at her father, still on his knees, tears streaming down his face, looked at the case on the desk, looked at Vittorio, who watched her with the patience of someone who'd already won. How long? I'm sorry? How long do I have to stay married to you? Until death. He paused. Mine, preferably. I'm 29 years older than you. With luck, you'll be free before you're 50. 30 years. Her voice sounded distant. You want 30 years of my life. I want a wife. The duration is simply biology. And if I run, you won't. How do you know? Because you're here instead of in Chicago. Because you flew across an ocean for a father who lied to you. Because despite everything, you're still asking questions instead of accepting your fate. He leaned back. You're a fighter, Miss Hayes. That's why you're valuable. But you're also loyal, and that loyalty will keep you here more effectively than any chain. He was right. She hated that he was right. I need time to think. You have 5 minutes. That's not 5 minutes to decide if your father lives or dies. I suggest you use them wisely. The room fell silent. Lila's mind raced through options that all led nowhere. Run. They'd catch her. Fight. They'd overpower her. Refuse. Her father would die, and then what? They'd probably kill her too. Or worse, at least if she agreed, she'd be alive. And alive meant she could still plan. Still look for an escape. Or maybe that was just what she told herself to make the choice bearable. If I agree, she said slowly, my father goes free. Completely free. The debt is cleared. Yes. And he leaves Italy. Tonight. Goes back to the States and never contacts you again. Agreed. And you don't hurt him. Ever. As long as you honor our arrangement, your father is untouchable. She turned to Richard. You need to leave Chicago, change your name, disappear. Lila, do it. Her voice hardened. You don't get to sacrifice me and then go back to your normal life. You live with this. Every day. You live with what you did. He flinched, but nodded. She faced Vittorio again. I want it in writing. Of course. He was already pulling out paper. I'll have my lawyer draw up a contract. I want my own lawyer to review it. You may have one present for the signing, but the marriage happens within the week. A week? Her voice cracked. I need more time. The longer we wait, the more chance you have to reconsider. We both know that. He began writing, his handwriting surprisingly elegant. 1 week, then you become Lila DeLuca. The name sounded wrong, felt wrong. Everything about this was wrong, but her father was alive, still breathing, still whole. Fine. The words scraped out of her. I'll do it. Richard made a sound between a sob and a gasp. Vittorio didn't even smile, just nodded once and kept writing. Marco will show you to your room. You'll stay in the East Wing until the wedding. Don't try to leave the grounds. The security system is quite sophisticated, and I'd hate for you to be injured by accident. Injured by accident. She laughed, and it sounded slightly hysterical. Right. Your belongings will be brought up. You'll have access to the library, the gardens, and the pool. Meals will be delivered to your room unless I request your presence. Am I a prisoner or a guest? You're my fiancé. Act accordingly. Marco appeared at the door as if summoned. Lila started to follow him, then stopped and looked back at her father one more time. I'll never forgive you for this. Richard's face crumpled completely. I know. She left without another word. Us. The room they gave her was beautiful. That was the worst part. High ceilings, antique furniture, a four-poster bed with sheets that probably cost more than her car. French doors opened onto a balcony overlooking manicured gardens and rolling hills. Under different circumstances, it would have been a dream. Instead, it was a cage with expensive wallpaper. Layla stood on the balcony as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and tried to figure out how her life had gone from ordinary to nightmare in less than 12 hours. This morning, she'd been worried about her student loans. Now she was engaged to a man she'd met 2 hours ago, a man who collected debts with torture equipment and bought wives like he was purchasing furniture. She should be crying, should be breaking down. But the tears wouldn't come, just a hollow numbness that felt like she'd been scooped out and left empty. A knock at the door made her turn. Come in. A woman entered, maybe 30, pretty in a severe way. She carried a garment bag. Mr. DeLuca sent me to take your measurements. For what? Your wedding dress. Of course, because this nightmare had to be thorough. I can wear whatever I want, Lila said. Mr. DeLuca prefers you wear something appropriate. The woman's English was accented but clear. I'm Rosa. I'll be helping you prepare for the ceremony. I don't need help. Nevertheless, Rosa hung the garment bag in the closet and pulled out a measuring tape. If you could stand here, please? Lila wanted to refuse, wanted to tell her to get out. But what was the point? She'd already agreed, already sold herself. What did it matter what dress she wore while doing it? She stood and let Rosa measure her. Arms, waist, bust, hips. Rosa worked efficiently, professionally, like this was just another job. Maybe it was. Maybe Vittorio bought wives regularly, and this was just routine. How long have you worked for him? Lila asked. 3 years? Is he always like this? Rosa paused, tape measure in hand. Like what? Cold, controlling, threatening. Mr. DeLuca is a businessman. That's not an answer. Rosa met her eyes. He's fair. If you honor your agreements, he honors his. If you betray him... She didn't finish the sentence. And the women who came before me? What happened to them? There were no women before you. Lila blinked. What? You're the first, Rosa resumed measuring. Mr. DeLuca has never been married, never been engaged. He's very selective. Lucky me. Yes, Rosa said quietly. You are. Something in her tone made Lila look closer. Rosa's expression remained neutral, but there was something in her eyes, not pity, exactly, more like understanding or warning. What aren't you telling me? Nothing that matters. Rosa finished the last measurement and wrote the numbers in a small notebook. Your dress will be ready in 3 days. Until then, I'll bring you appropriate clothing. Appropriate for what? Dinner. Mr. DeLuca expects you to join him tonight. I'm not hungry. He expects you. Rosa moved toward the door. 7 o'clock. Someone will come to escort you. She left before Lila could argue. The next 2 hours passed in a haze. Lila tried the balcony doors. Locked. Tried the bedroom door. Locked from the outside. She was definitely a prisoner, just one in a prettier cell than expected. Her phone had no signal, and when she checked, she found it had been wiped. No contacts, no apps, nothing but the factory settings. They'd thought of everything. At 7, the lock clicked. Marco stood outside, impassive as ever. This way. What if I don't want to come? Mr. DeLuca is waiting. Not an answer, just a fact. Lila followed because what choice did she have? He led her to a dining room that could have seated 20 but held only one table, set for 2. Candles flickered. Classical music played softly. It would have been romantic if it wasn't a preview of her prison sentence. Vittorio stood when she entered, and the gesture was so unexpectedly polite it threw her off balance. He wore different clothes now, still expensive but more casual. A white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Without the suit jacket, she could see he was leaner than she'd thought, built like someone who stayed in shape out of discipline rather than vanity. "Miss Hayes, please sit." She sat across from him, as far away as the intimate table allowed. "Wine?" He held up a bottle. "I'm 19. In America, yes. Here, the drinking age is 18. He poured 2 glasses anyway. "I won't force you, but I recommend it. It helps." "With what?" "Reality." She took the glass and drank half of it in one swallow. He was right. It did help. A little. A server appeared with the first course, some kind of pasta that smelled incredible and tasted like ash in her mouth. Lila pushed it around her plate, while Vittorio ate with the same measured precision he seemed to apply to everything. "You should eat," he said. "I'm not hungry." "You haven't eaten since the plane." "How do you know that?" "I know everything about you, Miss Hayes. Where you went to school, your grade point average, your favorite coffee shop, the boy you dated sophomore year who broke your heart." He took a sip of wine. "I don't make decisions without research." "That's not research, that's stalking." "Call it what you like." "Did your research tell you I don't want to be here?" "Of course you don't want to be here. That's irrelevant." The casual dismissal of her feelings should have made her angrier, but she was too tired, too wrung out. Why me? If you wanted a wife, you could have found someone willing, someone who actually wanted to marry you. Could I? He set down his fork. "I'm 54 years old. I've made enemies, powerful ones. Any woman who married me willingly would be doing so for money or status, and would betray me the moment someone offered more. But you're here because you love your father. That loyalty is genuine, and genuine loyalty is the only kind that matters." "I'll hate you." "Probably." "I'll make your life miserable." "You'll try." He almost smiled. "But you'll also survive, adapt, eventually thrive, because that's who you are." "You don't know who I am. I know you better than you think." He leaned back. "You're smart. Scholarship to a good school despite your father's modest income. You're resourceful, worked 3 jobs to pay for expenses your scholarship didn't cover. You're brave. You flew to a foreign country on 24 hours' notice to help someone who, let's be honest, didn't deserve it." His eyes held hers. "You're exactly what I need. A prisoner? A partner. Partners choose each other." In fairy tales, perhaps. In reality, most marriages throughout history have been arrangements, business transactions. This is simply more honest about it. "Honest?" She laughed bitterly. "There's nothing honest about forcing someone into marriage." "I'm not forcing you. You agreed." "Under duress." "Under pressure," he corrected. "There's a difference." "Not to me." "Then you'll learn." He gestured to her untouched plate. "Eat. You'll need your strength." "For what?" "For tomorrow. Your education begins." Something in his tone made her stomach clench. "What education?" "You're going to be my wife. That requires certain skills, knowledge, understanding." He stood, and the candlelight made his shadow stretch across the table. "I'll see you at 8. Don't be late." He left her sitting there, alone with cold pasta and colder fear, wondering what fresh hell tomorrow would bring. But she didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her father's face. The case of torture implements. Vittorio's calm expression as he discussed her life like a business deal. When dawn broke, she was already awake, staring at the ceiling and trying to remember who she'd been yesterday. That girl felt impossibly far away now. At 8 sharp, the lock clicked. But it wasn't Marco this time. It was Vittorio himself, dressed in dark slacks and a crisp shirt that probably cost more than her monthly rent back home. "Come with me." She followed him through the villa, downstairs and corridors she hadn't seen before, until they reached a room that looked like a library crossed with an office. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk, maps on the walls, and in the center a table with papers spread across it. "Sit." He gestured to a chair. She sat. He pulled out the chair across from her, moving a stack of documents between them. "Before we continue, we need to establish some rules." "Your rules, you mean?" "Our rules. Because if this arrangement is going to work, we both need to understand the boundaries." He opened the first folder. First, you will not try to escape. Not because you can't, I'm sure you could find ways, but because the consequences would be severe. Not for you, for your father. You said if I agreed, if you honor the agreement. The moment you break it, so do I. His voice remained level. Second, you will learn what I teach you. I expect intelligence, attention, and effort. This isn't optional. What are you teaching me? How to survive in my world. He slid a photograph across the table. A man, maybe 40, smiling at the camera. This is Antonio Russo. He runs shipping operations through Naples. 3 months ago, he stole from me. 2 weeks ago, he was found dead in his car. Lila's breath caught. I'm showing you this not to frighten you, though I'm sure it does. I'm showing you because you need to understand what kind of life you're entering. The people I do business with are not businessmen in the conventional sense. They're dangerous, ruthless, and if you appear weak, they'll use you against me. So don't appear weak, got it? It's more than appearance. You need to actually become strong, sharp, capable of holding your own in rooms full of predators. He pulled out more photographs, more faces, some smiling, some serious, all of them looking like people you wouldn't want to meet in a dark alley. You'll meet all of them, at the wedding, at dinners, at functions, and you'll need to navigate those interactions without showing fear. How am I supposed to do that? I'll teach you. He closed the folder. Starting now, tell me, what do you know about power? Excuse me? Power. The concept, what it means. I don't know. Having control over things. Too simple. Power is the ability to shape outcomes, to make people do what you want without force. Fear is crude. Money is temporary. But respect lasts. He stood and moved to the window. When you walk into a room, people will make assumptions about you. Young, American, naive. You'll use those assumptions. How? By being exactly what they expect until the moment you're not. He turned back to her. Let them underestimate you. Let them think you're just a pretty face I acquired. Then, when it matters, show them the truth. Which is that you're observant, intelligent, capable of understanding their weaknesses even as they're cataloging yours. He returned to the table. We'll start with languages. You speak English. You'll learn Italian, then French, then enough Russian to follow conversations. I'm terrible at languages. You'll improve. We'll also cover history, my history, specifically. Who my allies are, who my enemies are. The debts owed and the grudges held. He pulled out another folder, this one thicker. You'll memorize faces, names, relationships. By the wedding, you should be able to walk into any room and know exactly who's in it. That's impossible in a week. Then you'll sleep less. No sympathy, just fact. You'll also learn how to move, how to speak, how to dress appropriately for different occasions. Rosa will help with that. And you'll learn how to defend yourself. That got her attention. What? I have enemies. Some of them might try to use you against me. You need to be able to protect yourself if I'm not there. You want me to learn to fight? I want you to learn to survive. He checked his watch. We have 2 hours before your Italian lesson. Let's begin with the basics. The next 2 hours were brutal. Vittorio walked her through what felt like 100 photographs, drilling her on names and positions until her head spun. Every time she hesitated, he'd make her start over. By the end, she could recite them backwards. Then Rosa appeared with an armful of clothes and spent another hour showing her how to walk in heels, how to sit properly, how to enter and exit a car without flashing anyone. It was humiliating and exhausting, and when Lila finally stumbled back to her room, she collapsed onto the bed fully clothed. She woke to someone shaking her shoulder. Rosa again. Italian lesson in 20 minutes. You need to change. I need to sleep. After the lesson, come on. The Italian tutor was a severe woman named Francesca, who made it clear she had no patience for Americans who couldn't roll their R's. For 2 hours, Lila stumbled through pronunciations while Francesca corrected her with increasing exasperation. Then came dinner with Vittorio again. More drilling, more names, more questions that felt like tests she was constantly failing. Who is Matteo Conti? Your accountant, based in Milan, handles your legitimate businesses. And his weakness? He gambles, small stakes, but regularly. Good. And Sophia Marchetti runs your art acquisition, former curator, married to someone you don't trust. Why don't I trust him? Because he used to work for the Russo family before Antonio died. Excellent. He cut into his steak. You're learning. I'm parroting information. That's not the same as learning. It's the first step. By the time she got back to her room that night, Lila was so tired she could barely stand. But as she was pulling off her shoes, she noticed something on the bedside table. A book. One she hadn't seen before. She picked it up. Pride and Prejudice, her favorite novel. The one she'd read so many times the spine was cracked and pages were dog-eared. A note was tucked inside the cover. Vittorio's handwriting, even prisoners deserve small comforts. She should have thrown it across the room, should have torn it apart. Instead, she held it against her chest and finally let herself cry. The days blurred together. Italian lessons, etiquette training, self-defense sessions with a man named Carlo, who didn't believe in going easy on her. Lila collected bruises like badges, each one a reminder that she was still alive, still fighting. On the fourth day, Rosa brought the wedding dress. It was beautiful, simple, elegant, probably cost more than her car and her student loans combined. Lila stared at it hanging in the closet and felt nothing. You should try it on, Rosa said. Why? It's not like I have a choice. Still, you should see how it fits. Lila let Rosa help her into it. The fabric felt like water, cool and smooth against her skin. It fit perfectly, of course, because Vittorio didn't do anything halfway. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the reflection. The girl staring back looked older, harder, like someone who'd seen the world for what it really was and decided to survive it anyway. You look beautiful, Rosa said quietly. I look like a sacrifice. Maybe, Rosa met her eyes in the mirror. But sacrifices can become something else, if they're smart enough. What's that supposed to mean? It means Mr. DeLuca is powerful, yes, but power goes both ways. You just have to figure out how to use yours. Before Lila could ask what she meant, Rosa was already gathering the dress, packing it away. The wedding is tomorrow. Get some rest. Rest? Right. That night, Lila stood on her balcony and looked out at the grounds. Somewhere beyond those walls was freedom. Her old life. The future she'd planned before her father had traded it away. But that future was gone. Dead as the man in the photograph Vittorio had shown her. All she had now was this. Tomorrow she'd put on that dress and say words that would bind her to a stranger. A criminal. A man who'd bought her like property. And then what? Then she'd survive. Because that's what she did. The knock on her door came at midnight. She almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Vittorio stood in the hallway, still fully dressed despite the late hour. May I come in? It's your house. It's your room. She stepped aside and let him enter. He moved to the balcony, looking out at the same view she'd been staring at. Tomorrow changes everything, he said. No kidding. I want you to know. I don't expect affection, or even cooperation beyond what we've agreed, but I do expect honesty. He turned to face her. If you have questions, concerns, things you need, tell me. I can't promise I'll accommodate everything, but I'll listen. Why? Because despite how this started, I don't want you to be miserable. Little late for that, I know. And for the first time, she heard something in his voice that wasn't control or certainty. It was almost regret. I know what I've taken from you. I won't pretend otherwise, but I can offer you something in return. What? Protection, security, power, if you learn to wield it. He moved closer. You think you're a prisoner now, but in time you might find this cage has advantages. I doubt it. We'll see. He headed for the door, then paused. Try to sleep. Tomorrow will be difficult. Wait. She didn't know why she stopped him. My father. Did he really leave? Yes, he's back in Chicago, changed his name. He'll live quietly for the rest of his life. Good. Do you want me to arrange contact? Monitored, of course, but no. The word came out harder than she intended. I meant what I said. I'm done with him. Vittorio studied her for a long moment. Understood. After he left, Lila finally climbed into bed. Tomorrow she'd become someone's wife, someone's property, someone's cage bird. But Rosa's words echoed in her mind. Power goes both ways. Maybe, just maybe, if she was smart enough. The wedding dress felt like a shroud. Lila stood in front of the mirror while Rosa made final adjustments, pinning here, smoothing there, acting like this was normal, like brides got ready for their forced marriages every day in this villa. Maybe they did. What did Lila know about Vittorio's world? A week ago, she'd been studying for finals. Now she was about to legally bind herself to a man who'd threatened to torture her father in front of her. "You look beautiful," Rosa said, stepping back to admire her work. "I look like a sacrifice." That too. At least Rosa was honest about it. But a beautiful one. The ceremony was small. Just Vittorio, a priest who looked nervous, Marco and a few other men Lila recognized from her study sessions, and Rosa as a witness. No guests, no celebration, just a legal transaction wrapped in religious ceremony. Lila walked down a makeshift aisle in the villa's chapel, because of course Vittorio had a private chapel, and tried not to think about what her real wedding was supposed to look like. Her college boyfriend, maybe, or someone she met after graduation. A big white dress she actually chose. Her father walking her down the aisle with pride instead of shame. Friends crying happy tears instead of this sterile, silent room. Vittorio stood at the altar in a black suit that probably cost more than her semester's tuition, watching her approach with an expression she couldn't read. Not happy, exactly. Not sad, either. Just focused, like she was a business deal he was closing. The priest spoke in Italian, and Lila understood enough now to catch the important parts. Promises about sickness and health, good times and bad. Words that should have meant something but felt hollow when she wasn't choosing to say them. When it came time for her vows, she hesitated. Vittorio's eyes met hers, and for just a second, she saw something flicker there. Not quite sympathy, more like acknowledgement. He knew what this was costing her, knew she was doing this under duress, and he was going through with it anyway. She said the words, made the promises, hated herself a little more with each syllable. When the priest pronounced them married and Vittorio leaned in to kiss her, she turned her head at the last second. His lips brushed her cheek instead, and she heard someone clear their throat uncomfortably. "It's done," Vittorio said quietly. "You're safe now. Your father's safe." Safe. The word tasted like metal. Right. The reception was worse than the ceremony. A formal dinner in the main dining room, Lila seated next to her new husband, while men she barely knew toasted their marriage. They spoke in Italian, some of them switching to English for her benefit, talking about loyalty and family and strength like those words meant something in this context. Lila pushed food around her plate and smiled when she was supposed to, and felt like she was watching all of this happen to someone else. Dissociation? Probably. Her mind's way of protecting her from the reality of what she'd just done. "You need to eat," Vittorio murmured beside her. "I need a lot of things. Food isn't high on the list." "Lila, don't." She cut him off. "Don't act like you care about my well-being. We both know what this is." He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Fair enough." After dinner, after the toasts, after what felt like hours of polite conversation and careful smiles, Vittorio stood and offered her his hand. "It's late. We should retire." Lila's stomach dropped. She'd been so focused on getting through the wedding, she hadn't let herself think about what came after. About wedding nights and expectations, and the phrase, "fulfill the duties that entails," he'd used that first day. "I'm not—" She stood without taking his hand. "I can't." "Relax." His voice was low enough that only she could hear. "I'm not an animal. We're going to our rooms, separately, nothing more." "Our rooms?" "You'll keep the east wing. I'm in the west. We'll maintain separate spaces." He gestured toward the door. "But we need to walk out together. Appearances matter." She let him guide her out of the dining room, his hand at the small of her back, playing the part of the devoted husband. The moment they were out of sight of the others, he dropped his hand. "This way." He walked her to her room, not the one she'd been staying in, but a larger suite that connected to his through a shared sitting room. It was beautiful, like everything in this place. Four-poster bed, antique furniture, a balcony overlooking the gardens. "Your things have been moved here," Vittorio said, standing in the doorway. "You'll have more space, more privacy." "Privacy," she almost laughed, "in a room that connects to yours. The door locks, from your side." He pulled out a key and handed it to her. I won't come through unless you invite me. That's a promise. And I'm supposed to believe you, the man who bought me? You don't have to believe anything. Lock the door. Test it. You'll see. He moved to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I meant what I said. I won't force you. This marriage will be whatever you make it. I didn't make it anything. You did. Then I'll live with that. He looked tired suddenly, older than his 54 years. Good night, Lila. After he left, she locked the door, then tested it, then put a chair under the handle for good measure. Only then did she let herself collapse onto the bed and finally cry. The tears came hard and ugly, weeks of fear and anger and grief pouring out all at once. She cried for the life she'd lost, for the girl she'd been, for her father's betrayal and her own helplessness. Cried until she had nothing left, until her throat was raw and her eyes were swollen and she felt empty. Then she got up, washed her face, and started planning. Because if there was one thing the past week had taught her, it was that Vittorio was right about one thing. She was a fighter, and fighters didn't give up just because the first round went badly. The next morning, Lila woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and a moment of disorientation before reality crashed back. Married. She was married to Vittorio De Luca. The wedding ring on her finger proved it, heavy and foreign. A knock at the sitting room door made her tense. Mrs. De Luca, Rosa's voice. May I come in? Mrs. De Luca. The name felt like someone else's. Yes. Rosa entered with a breakfast tray. Mr. De Luca thought you might prefer to eat in your room this morning. He's already left for the city, business meetings. He'll be back for dinner. So he wasn't even here. Somehow that made it worse. Like he could just marry her and go back to normal while her entire world had imploded. Did he say anything else? Just that your schedule continues as normal. Francesca will be here at 10 for Italian lessons. Carlo at 2 for training. Rosa set down the tray. He also asked me to give you this. She handed Lila an envelope. Inside was a credit card with her new name on it and a note in Vittorio's precise handwriting. For anything you need, no limit. Consider it a small compensation for yesterday. Money. He thought money would make this better. Lila threw the card across the room and immediately felt stupid for the dramatic gesture. Rosa retrieved it calmly and set it on the dresser. You should keep it, she said. Having your own money is power. Don't throw away power just to make a point. She was right, but Lila didn't want to admit it. The day passed in a haze of lessons and training. Francesca drilled her on verb conjugations until Lila's head spun. Carlo taught her how to use someone's momentum against them, how to target pressure points, how to cause maximum pain with minimum effort. Useful skills for a prisoner, she supposed. That evening, Vittorio returned just as Rosa had predicted. Lila heard him moving around in the west wing, heard water running as he showered, heard the clink of glass as he poured himself a drink. The walls were thicker than she'd thought, but not thick enough. Dinner was in the small dining room this time, just the two of them. Vittorio had changed into more casual clothes, still expensive, but at least he wasn't wearing a suit. How was your day? He asked, cutting into his steak. You mean my first day as your wife? Just wonderful. I meant your lessons. I know what you meant. She took a sip of wine. They were fine. Francesca says my accent is improving. Carlo says I have good instincts. You do. You proved that when you agreed to this arrangement. He met her eyes. Most people would have let their father die rather than sacrifice themselves. Maybe I'm just weak. You're many things, Lila. Weak isn't one of them. They ate in silence for a while. Lila tried to figure out what game he was playing. The separate rooms, the promise not to force her, the credit card with no limit. It didn't fit with the man who'd calmly opened a case of torture implements. Why did you really marry me? She asked finally. And don't say it was about loyalty. There had to be other options. Vittorio set down his fork and considered her question. Do you know what my biggest weakness is? Besides buying wives? Besides that. He almost smiled. I'm good at many things. Building empires, making money, eliminating threats. But I'm terrible at trust. Everyone who gets close to me wants something. Power, status, money. They lie. They betray. They play games. So you thought forcing someone to marry you would solve that problem? I thought someone who was here because of genuine loyalty, even if it wasn't to me, would be incapable of the kind of betrayal I've experienced. Your love for your father is real. That makes you trustworthy in a way money can't buy. That's twisted. That's survival. He poured more wine. I told you, my world is full of predators. I needed someone by my side who wouldn't sell me out the moment they got a better offer. And it never occurred to you to just find someone who actually liked you? I'm 54 years old and run a criminal empire. Women who express interest in me fall into two categories: those who want my money and those who are gathering intelligence for my enemies. Sometimes both. So you bought a teenage bride instead. Much healthier. I never said it was healthy. I said it was practical. He leaned back. But I'm starting to think it was also cruel. You've made that abundantly clear. Good. You should think that. I do. Daily. He stood. I'm going to my study. You don't have to join me for breakfast tomorrow if you don't want to, or any meal. Rosa will bring food to your room. Trying to avoid me? Trying to give you space. There's a difference. After he left, Lila sat alone at the too large table and tried to figure out if she believed him. About the trust issues, the separate rooms, any of it. The problem was, it actually made a twisted kind of sense. In a world where everyone was using everyone else, someone bound by circumstance instead of choice might actually be more reliable. It didn't make it right, but it made it logical. And somehow, that was worse. The weeks that followed fell into a routine that would have been almost normal if not for the circumstances. Lila spent her mornings with language lessons and her afternoons with Carlo, getting stronger and faster and more capable of defending herself. She read voraciously from Vittorio's extensive library, devouring books on Italian history and business and anything else that might help her understand the world she'd been forced into. Evenings were the hardest. That's when Vittorio was usually home, and they'd have dinner together in that careful, polite way that felt like a performance. They talked about safe topics, her lessons, current events, the books she was reading, never about the wedding, never about what happened to her father, never about the fact that they were married but living like polite strangers. One night, about a month after the wedding, Lila made the mistake of asking about his work. What exactly do you do? Besides the schools and the less legitimate sources? Vittorio looked up from his wine. Do you really want to know? I'm married to you. Seems like I should understand what you actually do. Most wives prefer not to know. I'm not most wives. He smiled slightly at that. No, you're definitely not. He gestured to the seat beside him. Come here, I'll show you. I'll show. She moved to sit next to him and he pulled out his phone, scrolling through what looked like spreadsheets and shipping manifests. The legitimate businesses are easy. Import-export mostly. Art, wine, luxury goods. That's about 40% of my income. He switched screens. The rest comes from things society frowns upon. Gambling operations, loan enforcement, occasionally moving merchandise that customs officials would prefer stayed elsewhere. You mean drugs? Sometimes. Also weapons. Information. Whatever people are willing to pay for. He looked at her. Does that bother you? Should it? Most people would say yes. Most people didn't get traded to a crime lord by their gambling-addicted father. She studied the numbers on his phone. How much of this is violent? The business itself? Not very. The people I deal with, though, they speak in violence. It's the language of power in this world. Like Antonio Russo. Like Antonio Russo. He closed the phone. The Russos have been a thorn in my side for years. Antonio's death was necessary. His brother's taking it personally was predictable. At some point, we'll have to address it. Address it meaning what? More deaths? Hopefully just a demonstration. Show them that continuing this feud costs more than it's worth. He poured her more wine. Welcome to my world, Lila. It's not pretty, but it's honest. Honest. She tested the word. Is that what you call it? More honest than the legitimate world, anyway. Politicians lie about what they want. Businessmen hide their greed behind corporate speak. At least in my world, everyone knows the stakes. Cross me and I'll destroy you. Honor your agreements and I'll protect you. Simple. Simple. She laughed bitterly. Nothing about this is simple. No, but it's clear. That counts for something. She wanted to argue, to point out all the ways his logic was twisted. But sitting there with the wine warming her blood and Vittorio explaining his empire with the patience of a teacher, she found herself actually curious. This was her life now. Whether she wanted it or not, might as well understand it. "Tell me about the others," she said. "The people in the photographs you made me memorize. What do they actually do?" So he did. For the next 2 hours, Vittorio walked her through his world. Who handled what operations? Who could be trusted and who couldn't? Which alliances were solid and which were held together by mutual fear? He spoke about it clinically, without pride or shame, just facts. And Lila listened, absorbed, started to see the patterns and power structures he'd been trying to teach her about. "You're good at this," he said eventually. "At what?" "Seeing connections, understanding motivations." He gestured to the notes she'd been taking. "Most people hear what I just told you and get overwhelmed. You're already figuring out the weak points." Is that a compliment or an observation? Both. He stood and stretched. "It's late. You should rest." "Vittorio." She stopped him before he could leave. "Why are you really telling me all this? You could keep me in the dark." "Most men would, because you're my wife, not my pet. If you're going to be part of this world, you should understand it." He paused in the doorway. "And because I think you're capable of handling it, more capable than you know." After he left, Lila looked at her notes. Pages and pages of information about criminal enterprises and power structures, and the delicate balance that kept Vittorio's empire running. Information that could destroy him if it fell into the wrong hands. He just handed her a weapon and trusted her not to use it. Maybe he was right about her loyalty. Or maybe he was betting that she'd learned enough to know using that information would put her in just as much danger as him. Either way, she had power now. Real power. The kind that came from knowledge instead of money. And she had no idea what to do with it. The next day, Marco found her in the library. "Mrs. DeLuca, Mr. DeLuca asked me to inform you that you'll be attending a dinner party tomorrow night. Business associates and their wives." Lila's stomach clenched. "He wants me to go to a party?" "He needs you to. Appearances are important in his line of work. A man with a wife is more stable, more trustworthy." Marco's expression was neutral. "Rosa will help you prepare. The dress code is formal." "And if I refuse? Then he'll make excuses and you'll stay home. But it would be better if you went. For both of you." After Marco left, Lila sat with that. Her first public appearance as Vittorio's wife. Meeting the predators he'd warned her about. The people who'd be looking for weaknesses, cataloging everything about her to use later. She could refuse. Could hide in the villa and avoid his world as much as possible. Or she could do what he'd been training her for. Walk into that room and prove she wasn't just some naive girl he'd acquired. Show them she was capable of holding her own. When Vittorio came home that evening, she was waiting for him in the study. "Marco told me about the dinner party. You don't have to go if you're not ready." "I'll go." She stood. "But I need something from you first." "What?" "The truth. About what you expect from me at these things. No vague instructions about being strong or holding my own. Actual specifics." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. Sit down. This might take a while." For the next hour, Vittorio walked her through the social dynamics of his world. Who she should be polite to but keep at arm's length. Who she could actually trust. How to deflect invasive questions. How to read the room and know when conversations were about more than they seemed. "Most importantly," he said, "don't try to impress anyone. Let them underestimate you. A young American wife who doesn't speak much Italian, they'll think you're decoration. Use that." "How?" "Listen, people say things around decoration they wouldn't say around threats. You'll learn more staying quiet than you would engaging. You want me to spy for you. I want you to survive. Information is survival in this world." He leaned forward. "Lila, these people will smile at you and compliment your dress and mean every word of it. They'll also be looking for ways to use you against me. The best defense is to appear harmless while seeing everything." "That sounds exhausting." "It is, but you can do it." "How do you know?" "Because you've been doing it with me for over a month, playing the angry captive while actually absorbing everything I teach you. You think I haven't noticed how much you've learned? How you ask questions that prove you're 3 steps ahead?" He almost smiled. "You're already better at this than you realize." The dinner party was at an estate that made Vittorio's villa look modest. Rolling grounds, fountains, staff in actual livery. Lila wore a dress Rosa had picked out, elegant but not showy, expensive but not ostentatious, the kind of thing that said money without screaming it. "Remember," Vittorio murmured as they walked in, his hand at the small of her back. "You're not here to perform, just observe." The room was full of exactly the kind of people she'd expected, rich, powerful, with smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. The men gravitated toward Vittorio, and Lila found herself swept up by their wives. They were polite, asked about her background, her wedding, how she was adjusting to Italy. Surface-level questions that felt like reconnaissance. Lila answered vaguely, playing the role of the young bride who was still figuring things out. And while they talked, she listened. She heard about business deals disguised as casual conversation, about tensions between families, about someone named Dante who was expanding into territory he shouldn't, about shipments that had gone missing and fingers pointing in different directions. "Your Italian is quite good," one woman said. She was older, maybe 40, with diamonds that probably cost more than Lila's education. "How long have you been studying?" "Just a few months. My teacher is very patient." Vittorio always was thorough about his acquisitions. The woman's smile didn't waver, but Lila heard the barb underneath. "You must be quite special for him to actually marry you." There it was. The subtle dig. The test to see if she'd react. "I'm lucky," Lila said simply. "He's been very kind." "Has he?" Another woman joined them, younger, with the kind of beauty that came from expensive maintenance. "That's surprising. I always thought Vittorio incapable of kindness." "Perhaps you didn't know him well enough," Lila said pleasantly. The conversation moved on, but Lila catalogued it. These women didn't like Vittorio. Or maybe they did and were testing her. Either way, they were looking for cracks. She wouldn't give them any. On the drive home, Vittorio asked, "How was it?" "Informative." She told him about the conversations, about Dante's expansion, about the missing shipments. He listened without interrupting, and when she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "You did well." "I survived." "More than that, you gathered useful intelligence while making them think you were just a naive newlywed." He glanced at her. "That's not easy. Most people can't pull it off. Most people aren't being held prisoner and forced to learn spycraft." "True. But that doesn't make what you did less impressive." Back at the villa, Lila went straight to her room, exhausted from maintaining the pleasant facade for hours. But when she was getting ready for bed, she found a box on her dresser. Inside was a necklace. Simple, elegant, with a single diamond that caught the light. A note in Vittorio's handwriting, "You earned this tonight. Well done." She should have thrown it away. Should have refused the reward like some kind of trained dog. Instead, she put it on and looked at herself in the mirror. The necklace settled against her collarbone like it belonged there, and she barely recognized the woman staring back. Poised, elegant, someone who could walk into a room full of criminals and come out with valuable information. When had she become this person? The knock on the sitting room door surprised her. "It's me," Vittorio's voice. "May I come in?" She unlocked the door. He stood there in a robe, looking almost vulnerable without his usual armor of expensive suits. "I wanted to thank you," he said, "for tonight. I know it wasn't easy." "It wasn't hard either. That's what worries me." "Why?" "Because I'm getting good at this. At playing roles, at reading people, at being part of your world." She touched the necklace. "I should hate it, but I don't. And I don't know what that says about me." "It says you're adapting, surviving." He moved closer. "Lila, you're not becoming a bad person because you're learning to navigate a bad situation. You're just learning to survive." "Is there a difference?" "I'd like to think so." He reached out, then stopped himself. "May I?" She nodded, and he adjusted the necklace clasp, his fingers gentle against her neck. "It suits you," he said quietly. They stood there, closer than they'd been since the wedding, and Lila felt something shift. Not affection exactly, but recognition. They were both playing roles, both adapting, both doing what they had to do to survive. Maybe that was its own kind of partnership. "Good night, Vittorio." "Good night, Lila." After he left, she locked the door again, but this time she didn't put the chair under the handle. Baby steps. That's what this was. And she still didn't know if that was progress or surrender. The attack came on a Tuesday, 6 months after the wedding that had felt more like a funeral. Lila was in the library when she heard the first gunshot. Not close, but not distant either. Somewhere on the ground, sharp and unmistakable. She'd learned enough in the past months to recognize the sound, to know the difference between a car backfiring and a weapon being discharged. Her first instinct was to freeze. Her second was to run to the window. That's when the glass exploded. She hit the floor as shards rained down around her, arms covering her head, heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. More gunshots, closer now. Shouting in Italian, words she'd learned but wished she hadn't, orders, threats, the kind of language that came with violence. The library door burst open and Carlo was there, the same man who'd taught her how to break someone's nose, how to target vulnerable points when you were smaller and weaker. "Mrs. DeLuca, come with me. Now." She scrambled to her feet, glass crunching under her shoes. "What's happening?" "No time. Move." He pulled her into the hallway just as another window shattered somewhere above them. The villa had always felt like a fortress, but now it felt like a trap. Carlo's hand was tight on her arm as he steered her away from the main staircase, toward a door she'd never noticed before. "Where's Vittorio?" "In the city. He's on his way back." Carlo punched a code into a panel and the door swung open, revealing stairs leading down. "Go. Lock yourself in. Don't open it for anyone but me or Mr. DeLuca." "What about you?" "I have a job to do." He practically shoved her through the doorway. "Go." The door slammed shut behind her and she heard the lock engage. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting everything in harsh white. Lila took the stairs 2 at a time, her breath coming in ragged gasps, and found herself in what looked like a bunker. Concrete walls, steel door at the far end, a table with bottles of water and what looked like medical supplies. She tried the steel door, locked from the outside. Of course, more gunshots above her, muffled but persistent. She pressed her back against the wall and slid down until she was sitting on the cold floor, arms wrapped around her knees. This was real. This was actually happening. Someone was attacking the villa, attacking Vittorio's people, and she was trapped in a basement while it played out above her. The minutes crawled past. Or maybe it was hours. Time felt elastic, stretched thin by fear. She counted her breaths, tried to remember the techniques Carlo had taught her for staying calm under pressure. It didn't really work, but it gave her something to focus on besides the sounds of chaos filtering through the ceiling. Then, suddenly, silence. It was worse than the noise. Lila strained to hear anything, footsteps, voices, movement, but there was nothing. Just her own breathing and the hum of the emergency lights. The lock on the steel door clicked. She shot to her feet, looking around for something, anything to use as a weapon. Grabbed a bottle of water because it was better than nothing. The door opened. A man stepped through. Not Carlo, not Vittorio. Someone she'd seen in photographs during those brutal study sessions. One of the Russo family's people, the ones who'd been edged out after Antonio's death. "Well," he smiled, and it was all teeth. "Looks like we found the princess." Lila backed up until she hit the wall. "Stay away from me." "Or what? You'll throw that bottle at me?" He laughed, pulling out a gun. "Come on, we're going upstairs." "I'm not going anywhere with you." "Yes, you are. Unless you want me to drag you." He moved closer, close enough that she could smell cigarettes and sweat. "Your husband killed my cousin. Now I'm going to kill his wife. Fair trade, don't you think?" Her mind raced. Carlo's lessons flooded back. The gun was too far to grab. But he was close. Too close. And arrogant enough to think she wasn't a threat. He reached for her arm. Lila drove her knee up into his groin with everything she had. He doubled over with a choked sound, and she didn't hesitate. Grabbed his wrist, twisted it the way Carlo had taught her, and slammed it against the concrete wall. The gun clattered to the floor. She kicked it away and ran for the stairs. Behind her, he was cursing, getting up, coming after her. Lila took the stairs 3 at a time, burst through the door at the top, and found herself in chaos. The hallway was a wreck. Bullet holes in the walls, broken furniture, and bodies. She counted 3, all of them in dark suits, all of them not moving. She didn't stop to check if they were Vittorio's people or the attackers, just kept running, looking for anyone, anything familiar. A hand grabbed her from behind and she spun, fist already swinging. "Whoa! Mrs. DeLuca, it's me!" Marco caught her wrist before she could connect. His face was bleeding from a cut above his eye. "Are you hurt?" No, someone's in the basement. We know, Carlo's handling it. Marco pulled her toward the main entrance. We need to get you out of here, Mr. DeLuca's orders. Where is he? Coming, but we're not waiting. They made it to the front doors before they heard the cars, 3 of them speeding up the driveway in a formation that screamed military precision. For a second, Lila thought it was more attackers. Then she saw Vittorio in the lead vehicle. He was out before the car fully stopped, moving toward them with the kind of controlled fury that made the air feel electric. His eyes swept over Lila, cataloging, assessing. You're bleeding. She looked down. There was glass embedded in her forearm, blood running down to her wrist. She hadn't even felt it. I'm fine. Marco, report. 6 attackers. All down. 2 of ours injured, none critical. Mrs. DeLuca was in the bunker, but one of them found her. Marco's voice was tight. She handled it. Vittorio's eyes snapped back to her. Handled it how? He had a gun, Lila said. Her voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. I got it away from him. She's in shock, Marco said quietly. I'm not in shock. I'm fine. But her hands were shaking. Now that the adrenaline was fading, her whole body was shaking. I just want to sit down. Vittorio moved to her, and for a second she thought he might actually put his arm around her. He didn't, just guided her to one of the cars. Get in. Where are we going? Away from here, until I know it's secure. He looked at Marco. Clean this up. Find out how they got past the perimeter. And find that one in the basement. I want him alive. Sir. Vittorio slid into the car beside her as the driver pulled away from the villa. Lila watched it recede in the side mirror. This place that had been her prison for 6 months, now looking vulnerable in a way it never had before. You're sure you're not hurt? Vittorio's voice was quieter now, almost gentle. Just my arm. It's nothing. Let me see. She held out her arm and he examined it with surprising care, pulling out pieces of glass with steady hands. It should have hurt more than it did. Maybe she really was in shock. This one's deep, he said. You'll need stitches. Great. There's a doctor at the safe house. He'll take care of it. He pulled out a handkerchief and wrapped it around her arm, applying pressure. What happened in the bunker? I told you, he had a gun. I took it. How? The way Carlo taught me. She met his eyes. You hired him to teach me to defend myself. I defended myself. Something flickered across Vittorio's face. Not quite pride, but close. Did you kill him? No, just disabled him. Good. He kept pressure on her arm. The Russos have been making noise for months. I should have anticipated this. Who are the Russos? A family that thinks they should have more power than they do. Antonio's brothers mostly. They've been waiting for an opportunity. His jaw tightened. They chose the wrong one. What are you going to do? What needs to be done? The flat certainty in his voice should have scared her. Maybe it did, but mostly what Lila felt was tired. Bone-deep tired, like she could sleep for a week, and it still wouldn't be enough. The safe house turned out to be an apartment in the city, high up enough that you could see most of Rome spread out below. Vittorio's doctor was already there, a calm older man who stitched up Lila's arm while making small talk in accented English about the weather. You're very lucky, he said, tying off the last stitch. A few centimeters over, and this would have hit an artery. Lucky. Right. Lila watched him bandage her arm. Thanks. Get some rest. No strenuous activity for a few days. He packed up his bag and nodded to Vittorio. She'll be fine. After he left, Vittorio poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed her one. She took it without arguing, drank it without tasting it. You did well today, he said. I survived. That's different from doing well. In my world, they're the same thing. He sat across from her, and in the lamplight he looked older than usual, tired, like her. I'm sorry you had to experience that. Are you? The words came out sharper than she intended. Because it seems like exactly the kind of thing you should have expected when you forced me into this life. Yes. No deflection, no excuses, just agreement. You're right. I brought you into this knowing the risks. The fault is mine. The admission caught her off guard. In 6 months of marriage, Vittorio had been many things. Cold, controlled, demanding, occasionally almost kind. But he'd never been apologetic. What happens now? She asked. Now I make sure the Russos understand that attacking my home, my wife, is a mistake they won't live to repeat. He finished his whiskey. You'll stay here until the villa is secure. A few days, maybe a week. And then? Then we go back, resume our lives. He paused. Unless you'd prefer to go somewhere else. I could arrange for you to stay in the city permanently. You'd still be my wife, but you wouldn't have to live at the villa. It was the closest thing to freedom he'd ever offered. Lila should have jumped at it, should have said yes immediately, grabbed the escape route he was opening. Instead, she said, "No." Vittorio raised an eyebrow. "No? I'm not running away because someone attacked us. That's—" She searched for the right word. "That's letting them win. They already lost. They'll be dead by morning. Not them, the fear." She set down her glass. "You spent 6 months training me, teaching me how to survive in your world. I'm not going to hide the first time it gets real." He studied her for a long moment. "You've changed." "Yeah, well," she looked at her bandaged arm. "Turns out getting shot at has that effect." "I didn't mean today. I meant over the past months." He leaned back. "You're not the frightened girl who arrived at my door anymore. That girl died somewhere between the threats and the Italian lessons." "Did she?" His voice was softer now. "Or did she just learn to fight back?" Lila didn't have an answer for that. Wasn't sure she wanted one. They stayed at the safe house for 5 days. Vittorio left each morning to handle business, leaving her with guards who were polite but present. She spent the time reading, healing, trying not to think about the man in the basement or the bodies in the hallway. On the 3rd day, Rosa showed up with fresh clothes and news. "The villa's secure," she said, unpacking a suitcase onto the bed. "Mr. De Luca wanted me to tell you the library's being repaired. It should be finished by the time you return." The library. Lila had almost forgotten about the shattered windows, the glass everywhere. "That's where I was when it started." "I know." Rosa hung up a dress. "He's having bulletproof glass installed. All the windows on the ground floor." "That's excessive." "That's thorough." Rosa turned to face her. "You scared him, you know." "I scared him? How?" "When he got the call about the attack, he was in a meeting with very important people, and he just left. Didn't explain, didn't apologize, just walked out." She smiled slightly. "I've worked for him for 3 years. I've never seen him lose his composure. But when Marco told him someone had gotten to you, he lost it. He seemed fine when he got there, because he'd had 20 minutes in the car to get control back." Rosa sat on the edge of the bed. "I'm telling you this because I think you should know. You're not just a transaction to him anymore." "What am I then?" "I don't know, but it's something more." After Rosa left, Lila stood at the window and looked out at the city. 6 months ago, she would have given anything to be here, free, able to walk out the door. Now she had armed guards and stitches and a husband who'd apparently walked out of important meetings because she was in danger. It should have made her angry, should have felt like just another form of control. Instead, it felt like something she didn't have a name for yet. When Vittorio came back that evening, he found her on the balcony. "We can go back to the villa tomorrow, if you're ready." "I'm ready." He joined her at the railing, and they stood there in silence for a while. Below them, Rome glittered in the dusk, ancient and indifferent to their problems. "The Russos," Lila said finally. "Are they gone?" "Yes." "All of them?" "The ones who matter." He glanced at her. "Does that bother you?" "It should, shouldn't it? I should be horrified that you killed people. But you're not." "No." She looked at her bandaged arm. "They tried to kill me. You stopped them. I'm supposed to feel guilty about that?" "Most people would. I'm not most people anymore." She turned to face him fully. "That girl you bought 6 months ago, she would have been horrified, would have cried and had nightmares and maybe broken down completely. But you didn't want that girl, did you? You wanted someone who could survive your world. Congratulations, you got what you paid for." Something flashed in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or recognition. "Lila." "Don't, no." She held up her hand. "Don't apologize. Don't tell me you're sorry for changing me. You're not. And we both know it. This is what you wanted. Someone who wouldn't fall apart when things got violent. Someone who could take a punch and get back up." She moved closer to him, close enough to see the fine lines around his eyes. "So here I am. your wife, your partner, your creation. Are you happy with the results? He looked at her for a long time, and when he spoke, his voice was rough. No. No? I'm not happy with the results, because I took someone good and made them hard, someone innocent and taught them about violence, someone who had a future and forced them into my past. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her cheek. You were right that first night. There's nothing honest about forcing someone into marriage. I told myself it was practical, necessary, but the truth is simpler. I was selfish, and I'm not happy about what that selfishness cost you. It was the most honest he'd ever been with her. Maybe the most honest he'd been with anyone. Lila should have been angry. Should have thrown his words back in his face, reminded him that guilt didn't change anything, didn't give her back the life he'd stolen. Instead, she kissed him. It wasn't gentle or romantic or any of the things first kisses were supposed to be. It was hard and desperate and tasted like whiskey and regret. His hands came up to her face, then her hair, and she pressed closer, 6 months of tension and fear and unwanted attraction finally breaking through the walls they'd both built. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard. That was... Vittorio started. Don't. Lila cut him off. Don't analyze it. Don't ask what it means. Just don't. He nodded slowly. Okay. They went inside and he poured them both more whiskey. They drank in silence, and when Lila finally went to bed, she lay awake for hours, touching her lips and trying to figure out what the hell she'd just done. The villa looked the same when they returned, except it didn't. The new windows caught the light differently. There were more guards, their presence more obvious, and something in the air had shifted, like the house itself knew it had been violated and was determined not to let it happen again. Lila threw herself into her routines with renewed intensity. Italian lessons with Francesca, who was thrilled to discover her student had finally developed a decent accent. Training sessions with Carlo, who worked her twice as hard now that she'd proven she could handle herself. Dinners with Vittorio, where they talked about everything except what had happened on that balcony. 2 weeks after the attack, Marco pulled her aside after breakfast. Mrs. DeLuca, do you have a moment? Of course. He led her to a room she'd never been in before. An office, smaller than Vittorio's, with maps on the walls and files stacked neatly on the desk. He closed the door behind them. I wanted to thank you, he said. Lila blinked. For what? For what you did during the attack, with the man in the basement. Marco's expression was serious. He had information about who planned the attack, how they got past our security. If you'd killed him, we wouldn't have known. We couldn't have closed the gaps. I did not kill him because of information. I just didn't kill him. Still, it mattered. He pulled out a folder and handed it to her. Mr. DeLuca asked me to show you this. Inside were photographs. The man from the basement, being questioned. Others being arrested. Documents that looked official, stamped with government seals. We found the leak, Marco explained. One of our suppliers. He's been feeding information to the Russos for months. He's been dealt with. Dealt with? Lila closed the folder. That means dead, doesn't it? Yes. She should have felt something. Horror, disgust, anything. Instead, she just felt tired. Why are you showing me this? Because you're part of this now. Whether you wanted to be or not. And Mr. DeLuca thought you should know what your actions led to. Marco took the folder back. You saved lives that day. Ours. Maybe even his. I wanted you to know that. After he left, Lila sat in that office for a long time, thinking about the girl who'd stepped off a plane 6 months ago. That girl would have run from this, would have been horrified by the casual way Marco talked about death. But that girl was gone. In her place was someone harder, someone who'd fought back when attacked, someone who'd kissed her captor and didn't entirely regret it. She found Vittorio in his study that afternoon, working through papers with the kind of focus that meant he was trying not to think about something. Marco showed me the folder, she said from the doorway. He looked up. And I think I'm supposed to be upset, but I'm not. She came into the room, closed the door. Does that make me a terrible person? It makes you a survivor. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. He set down his pen. Do you regret it? Fighting back. No? Then you're not a terrible person. You're someone who refused to be a victim. He stood and came around the desk. That's not a flaw, Lila. That's strength. It doesn't feel like strength. It feels like I'm losing pieces of myself. You're not losing them. You're changing them. He stopped a few feet away, maintaining that careful distance they'd been keeping since the kiss. The girl who arrived here 6 months ago couldn't have survived what you've survived. You're not less than her. You're more. More damaged. More capable. He paused. I know you hate what I've made you, but I don't regret it. Because you're alive. And if you'd stayed that frightened girl, you wouldn't be. He was right. She hated that he was right. I'm tired of fighting this, she said quietly. Fighting what? This, us, whatever this is. She closed the distance between them. I don't want to hate you anymore. It's exhausting. You don't have to like me either. I know. She looked up at him. But I think I might anyway. And I really hate that about myself. Vittorio's expression softened. Lila, I kissed you because I wanted to, not because I had to, not because you forced me, because I wanted to. The confession came out raw, and I've been trying to figure out what's wrong with me, why I would want someone who bought me like property. But maybe the answer is simpler than that. What answer? Maybe I'm just as damaged as you are now. He flinched like she had hit him. You're not damaged. Then what am I? He struggled for words, and she'd never seen him struggle before. You're the strongest person I know. I'm a prisoner who fell for her captor. That's textbook Stockholm Syndrome. Is it? Or is it two people who went through hell together and found something unexpected on the other side? He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I don't have answers, Lila. I've spent 6 months trying to keep distance between us because I knew if I didn't, this would happen. This complication. Is that what I am? A complication? You're everything I didn't plan for. They stood there, close enough to touch but not touching, and Lila felt the weight of 6 months pressing down on them. All the lessons, the fear, the violence, the unwanted attraction they'd both been fighting. What do we do now? She asked. I don't know. That's honest, at least. I'm trying to be. His hand dropped from her face. I won't touch you unless you ask. That's a promise. Whatever this is between us, it happens on your terms, or it doesn't happen at all. What if my terms are complicated? Then they're complicated. He stepped back, putting distance between them again. I took your choice once. I won't do it again. Lila nodded and left before she could do something stupid like close that distance again. Before she could test whether he meant what he said. Before she could find out if this thing between them was real or just trauma wearing a different mask. That night, she dreamed about the attack. But in the dream, when the man grabbed her arm, she didn't fight back. She let him drag her upstairs, let him put the gun to her head. And when she looked around for help, there was no one. Just empty rooms and her own screaming. She woke up gasping, sheets twisted around her legs, and didn't go back to sleep. The next morning at breakfast, Vittorio took one look at her and said, Nightmares? How'd you know? I have them too. After violence. He poured her coffee. They'll fade eventually. How long is eventually? Depends on the person. He paused. There's something I want to show you, if you're interested. What kind of something? A different side of what I do. Not the violence. The other part. She was curious enough to agree. He drove them into the city, to a building that looked run down from the outside but was surprisingly well kept inside. Children's voices echoed through the halls, and Lila realized with a start that it was a school. You fund this? She asked. My mother was a teacher, Vittorio said. She believed education was the only real way out of poverty. When she died, I started this, in her memory. They walked through classrooms where kids were learning reading and math, where teenagers were working on computers, where adults were taking night classes to finish degrees they'd never gotten. The staff greeted Vittorio with genuine warmth, not the careful deference his business associates showed. How many schools like this do you have? Lila asked. 5. 3 in Italy, 1 in France, 1 in Greece. He stopped outside a classroom where a teacher was helping a struggling student with algebra. The money has to come from somewhere. Legitimate businesses provide some. The rest comes from less legitimate sources. You fund schools with drug money. Essentially, yes. That's... She stopped, trying to find the right word. Couldn't. I don't know what that is. It's practical. People like me exist whether society wants us to or not. We make money in ways society disapproves of. At least this way, some of that money does something good. They watched the teacher and student for a moment. The kid finally got the equation right, and his whole face lit up with pride. You're more complicated than I thought, Lila said quietly. Everyone is. If you look closely enough. On the drive back, Lila thought about that. About Vittorio funding schools with one hand while ordering deaths with the other. About herself. Becoming someone who could fight without hesitating but still felt guilty about liking it. Maybe they were both just collections of contradictions, trying to make sense of a world that didn't have easy answers. Thank you, she said as they pulled up to the villa, for showing me that. You're welcome. He turned off the car but didn't get out. Lila, what you said yesterday about falling for me. Her stomach clenched. What about it? Did you mean it? I don't know, maybe. She forced herself to meet his eyes. Does it matter? Yes. Why? Because if you did, then I've done something even worse than I thought. I didn't just take your freedom. I made you feel something for the person who took it. That's not your fault, isn't it? His voice was bitter. I brought you here, taught you my world, put you in situations where you had to depend on me. That's not love, Lila. That's conditioning. Then what do you feel? The question came out before she could stop it. When you look at me, what do you see? He was quiet for a long time. I see someone I was supposed to use and couldn't. Someone I was supposed to keep at arm's length and failed. Someone who was supposed to be a transaction and became... He shook his head. Something I don't have words for. Try. Important. The word came out rough. You became important, and that terrifies me. They sat there in this car, the villa looming ahead of them, and Lila understood. They were both trapped, her by force, him by choice. Both of them circling something that felt inevitable and destructive in equal measure. I'm going inside, she said finally. Before I do something we'll both regret. Like what? Like kiss you again. She got out of the car before he could respond, before she could see his reaction. Went straight to her room and locked the door and tried not to think about the way her heart was racing. This was dangerous. More dangerous than the attack, than the violence, than any of it. Because at least with those things, she knew what she was dealing with. This was uncharted territory, and she had no idea if she was strong enough to survive it. 3 weeks passed in a kind of stalemate. Lila and Vittorio circled each other like planets in orbit, close enough to feel the pull, far enough to avoid collision. They had dinner together most nights, conversations that stayed carefully neutral. They worked in adjacent rooms, her with her language lessons and his growing library of books, him with paperwork and phone calls in Italian she now mostly understood. They were polite, careful, like two people sharing space with a live grenade neither wanted to acknowledge. It was driving her crazy. The thing was, Lila had expected to hate her life here. Had planned on it, actually. Figured hatred would keep her sharp, keep her fighting, keep her from forgetting who she'd been before. But somewhere between the Italian conjugations and the self-defense drills, between surviving an attack and kissing the man who'd bought her, hatred had stopped being an option. Not because she'd forgiven him. She hadn't. But because anger took energy she didn't have anymore. And what was the point of staying furious at a situation that wouldn't change? So instead of hating, she started observing. And what she observed was complicated. Vittorio funded schools but ordered executions. He was patient with her questions, but ruthless with his enemies. He kept his promises, but had built an empire on broken ones. He'd stolen her life and then given her tools to survive the theft. None of it made sense, and all of it was true at the same time. On a Thursday morning, Rosa found Lila in the library, staring at the same page she'd been pretending to read for 20 minutes. You look distracted, Rosa said, setting down a tray with coffee and pastries. Just thinking. About? Whether I'm losing my mind or finally seeing clearly. Lila closed the book. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. Rosa sat down across from her, which she never did. In 8 months, their relationship had stayed professional, friendly but distant. This felt different. Can I tell you something? Rosa asked. Sure. I was 17 when Mr. DeLuca found me, working in a club I shouldn't have been working in, For people who didn't care that I was underage. She poured coffee with steady hands, but her voice was tight. One night things went wrong. A client got violent. I fought back. He broke my arm in 3 places. Lila's stomach turned. Rosa, Mr. DeLuca was there on business. Saw what happened. He bought out my contract that night, paid my boss triple what I was worth just to get me out of there. Took me to a hospital, made sure I got proper treatment. Then he offered me a job. Rosa met her eyes. Working for him. Legitimate work. Good pay. A place to live. Why are you telling me this? Because you think he's a monster, and maybe he is. But he's also the reason I'm alive, the reason I finished school, the reason I have a life instead of... She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. People aren't simple, Mrs. DeLuca. They're not good or bad. They're just people, making choices, living with consequences. He still forced me into this. I know. And I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying there's more to him than the worst thing he's done. Rosa stood. That's all. Think about it or don't. But I wanted you to know. After she left, Lila sat with that for a long time. She'd been so focused on what Vittorio had taken from her, she'd never really thought about what he might have given others. The schools were one thing, easy to dismiss as ego or tax evasion or whatever rationalization criminals used. But Rosa's story was different, personal, the kind of thing that didn't come with plaques or recognition. It didn't make what he'd done to her okay. Nothing could do that. But it made him human, and that was somehow worse than if he'd just been a monster. That night at dinner, Lila broke the careful silence they'd been maintaining. Rosa told me about how you met her. Vittorio's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Did she? Why didn't you tell me? It's her story to tell, not mine. But it changes things. Does it? He set down his fork. I still bought you, Lila. Still forced you into marriage. One good deed doesn't erase that. No, but it complicates it. She pushed food around her plate. I've been trying to figure you out. Put you in a box. Monster or man. But you won't fit. Most people don't. We're all just doing the best we can with the choices we're given. Some choices are worse than others. Agreed. He poured more wine. But I'm not going to apologize for saving Rosa, or funding schools, or any of the other things I've done that don't fit your image of what I should be. I'm not asking you to. Then what are you asking? Good question. Lila didn't have a good answer. I don't know. Maybe I'm just tired of pretending I understand any of this. Join the club. He almost smiled. I've been pretending for years. Pretending what? That I know what I'm doing, that I have control, that bringing you here was purely practical. He met her eyes. That I don't care what you think of me. The admission hung between them, heavy and honest. Do you? Lila asked quietly. Care what I think? More than I should. Why? Because somewhere between teaching you Italian and watching you refuse to break, you stopped being a transaction and started being... He struggled for words again. A person I respect. And I didn't expect that. Respect. She tested the word. That's a start, I guess. What would you prefer? I don't know. Something less complicated. She laughed, but it came out bitter. But I think we're way past simple. They finished dinner in silence, but it was a different kind now. Less careful, more weighted. Like they'd both admitted something that couldn't be taken back. Later that night, Lila stood on her balcony and watched the grounds. The security lights cast long shadows across the gardens. Somewhere out there, guards were patrolling, cameras were recording. The whole estate was a fortress, and she was still trapped inside it. But the bars felt different now, less like imprisonment and more like, what? Protection? Partnership? She didn't have words for it. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She already knew who it would be. Vittorio stood in the hallway, still dressed despite the late hour. Can't sleep? Seems to be a theme. She stepped aside to let him in. You? Too much on my mind. He moved to the balcony and they stood side by side, looking out at the same view. There's something I need to tell you. Lila's stomach clenched. That sounds ominous. Your father contacted Marco, wants to know how you're doing. The mention of Richard Hayes hit like a slap. Lila hadn't thought about him in weeks, had actively avoided it. And? I told Marco to ignore him. per your instructions. Vittorio glanced at her. But I thought you should know. Thank you. Do you want to respond? Send a message? No. The answer came quickly, automatically. He made his choice. I made mine. We're done. You're angrier at him than you are at me. Of course I am. You were honest about what you wanted. He lied. He traded me away and called it saving my life. She gripped the balcony railing. At least you never pretended to love me. Lila, I mean it. You were cruel, but you were honest. He was cruel and wrapped it in concern. I can forgive a lot of things, but not that. Vittorio was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, he asks about you constantly, begs for updates. Marco says he sounds broken. Good. She didn't feel guilty about the viciousness in her voice. He should be. And if he shows up here, tries to see you, then you tell him I'm dead. Tell him I hate him. Tell him whatever you want. Just don't let him anywhere near me. Understood. He moved closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. You're stronger than I thought possible, you know that? I had a good teacher. I didn't teach you this. The hatred, the anger, that's all you. I just gave you tools to survive. You're the one who decided what to do with them. She turned to face him fully. Is that supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to make you see what I see. His hand came up to her face, thumb brushing her cheek. Someone who refused to be broken. Someone who took the worst thing that ever happened to her and found a way through it. You're romanticizing trauma. I'm stating facts. Vittorio, she didn't know what she wanted to say. Didn't know if she wanted him to leave or stay, to stop touching her or pull her closer. He made the decision for her, dropping his hand and stepping back. I should go. It's late. Wait. The word came out before she could stop it. He paused at the door. Yes? Stay. Her heart was hammering. Just stay. Talk to me. I'm tired of being alone with my thoughts. He hesitated, and she could see him weighing it. The smart thing would be to leave, maintain the distance they'd been carefully preserving. But whatever they were doing, it clearly wasn't smart anymore. Okay, he said quietly. I'll stay. They ended up on the balcony, sitting in the chairs Lila never used, talking about nothing important, his childhood in Naples, her college plans that had evaporated, the kinds of mundane details that felt surreal given everything else. Did you always want this life? Lila asked. The crime, the violence, all of it? No, I wanted to be a doctor, actually. My mother's dream for me. He smiled slightly. But my father died when I was 15, left debts, enemies. I had two choices, run or take over. I chose to take over. Do you regret it? Every day, and not at all. He looked at her. It's given me power, wealth, the ability to help people like Rosa. But it's also cost me everything normal, relationships, trust, peace. You could have both, couldn't you? The legitimate business and the rest? Maybe. But the kind of people I associate with, the things I know, you can't just walk away from that. There's no retirement plan for men like me. You die or you get replaced. Those are the options. That's depressing. That's reality. He stretched his legs out. What about you? If you could have your old life back, would you take it? The question should have had an obvious answer. Of course she would. Of course she wanted her freedom, her future, everything he'd stolen. But when Lila opened her mouth, what came out was, I don't know. Vittorio's eyebrows rose. You don't know? That girl who got off the plane? She was naive, trusting. She thought the world worked a certain way, that people were basically good, that if you followed the rules, you'd be okay. Lila looked out at the dark grounds. I can't be her anymore. Even if you let me go tomorrow, I can't unknow what I know now, can't unfeel what I've felt. So what would I be going back to? A life that doesn't fit anymore? You're saying you prefer being here. I'm saying I don't know who I'd be out there anymore. At least here I know what I'm dealing with. The rules are clear, even if they're terrible. She met his eyes. Does that make sense? More than you know. He stood and pulled her to her feet. It's late. You should sleep. I won't, but thank you for the suggestion. She didn't let go of his hand. Vittorio? Yes? This thing between us, what are we doing? I have no idea. That's honest, at least. It's all I have. He squeezed her hand once and let go. Good night, Lila. After he left, she lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and tried to figure out when she'd stopped counting days until escape and started counting moments until she'd see him again. The next morning, Marco found her in the garden. Mrs. DeLuca, Mr. DeLuca asked me to give you this. He handed her a folder. Inside was a legal document, dense with Italian and English, stamped with official seals. Lila skimmed it, her Italian good enough now to get the general idea even before she reached the English translation. What is this? An amendment to your marriage contract. Mr. DeLuca is transferring assets to your name. Property, accounts, investments. Marco's expression was neutral. He wanted you to have financial independence. In case. In case what? In case you decide to leave. Or in case something happens to him. Either way, you'd be secure. Lila stared at the numbers. More money than she'd ever imagined having. Enough to disappear, to start over, to build any life she wanted. Why would he do this? You'd have to ask him. She found Vittorio in his study, reviewing what looked like shipping manifests. He glanced up when she entered, saw the folder in her hand, and set down his pen. Marco gave it to you? What is this? Lila held up the document. Why? Because you were right about choice. I took yours away, and I can't give you back the life I stole, but I can give you options for the future. He leaned back in his chair. Sign it. Don't sign it. It's yours either way. But if you want to leave, you'll have the means to do it properly. This is millions of dollars. Yes. You're just giving it to me. I told you months ago that you'd learn to wield power in this world. Money is power. Consider it your graduation gift. His voice was dry, but his eyes were serious. I won't keep you here with chains anymore, Lila. If you stay, it has to be because you choose to. Her hands were shaking. What if I leave tomorrow? Then you leave. I'll honor the arrangement. Your father stays safe. You stay safe. The money is yours regardless. You'd really just let me go. I'd hate it, but yes. He stood and came around the desk. I've taken enough from you. I won't take your future too. Lila looked at the document, at the freedom it represented, at the man who'd caged her and was now opening the door. Everything in her said this was a trap, had to be a trap. Men like Vittorio DeLuca didn't just give away power and control, except he was. She could see it in his face, the resignation in something else, hope, maybe, that she'd stay anyway. I need time to think, she said. Take all the time you need. She went back to her room and spread the documents out on the bed. Read them front to back, looking for loopholes, conditions, ways he could take it back. Found nothing. It was exactly what he'd said, unconditional financial independence. She could leave, could pack a bag tomorrow, walk out the door, and build a new life somewhere he'd never find her. The thought should have filled her with joy. Instead, it filled her with panic, because somewhere in the past 8 months, between the forced dinners and the language lessons and the moments of unexpected honesty, she'd stopped wanting to escape. Or rather, she'd started wanting something else more. Something she didn't have a name for yet, but knew involved the complicated, dangerous man downstairs who'd given her the very thing she'd begged for on that first terrible day. Her freedom. And she had no idea what to do with it. Rosa found her hours later, still sitting with the papers. You okay? I don't know. Lila gestured at the documents. Did you know about this? I helped prepare some of the paperwork. Yes. Why would he do it? Rosa sat on the edge of the bed. Because he's in love with you. The words hit like a physical blow. That's not... He can't be... Why not? You think powerful men don't fall in love, don't feel things? Rosa's voice was gentle. I've worked for him for years. I've never seen him like this. The way he looks at you when you're not watching, the way he changed after the attack. The schools were one thing, but this? She touched the documents. This is a man trying to fix something he knows he broke. Love doesn't work like that. You can't love someone you bought. Says who? Love doesn't follow rules. It doesn't care about right or wrong. It just is. Rosa stood. I'm not saying you have to feel anything. I'm just saying he does. And he's giving you the choice he never gave you before. After she left, Lila went to find Vittorio. He was still in his study, but the manifests were gone. Now he was just sitting there, staring out the window. "Is it true?" she asked from the doorway. He didn't turn around. "Is what true?" "What Rosa said about why you're doing this." A long silence. Then, "Yes?" "How long?" "I don't know. Months, maybe. It doesn't matter." "Of course it matters." She came into the room. "You can't just... You bought me, forced me to marry you. You don't get to fall in love with me like this is some kind of romance." "I know." His voice was rough. "Believe me, I know. You think I wanted this? To care about someone I have no right to care about? Someone who should hate me? I should hate you. But you don't." He finally turned to face her. "Do you?" Lila wanted to say yes, wanted to throw it in his face, make him hurt the way she'd hurt, but she'd never been good at lying. "No," she whispered. "I don't, and I hate that I don't." "Then we're even." "This isn't even. Nothing about this is even." She moved closer. "You're giving me money so I can leave, but what do you get?" "The knowledge that I did at least one thing right. That's not enough. It has to be." They stood there close enough to touch, and Lila felt the weight of 8 months pressing down on them. All the anger and fear and unwanted attraction, all the moments of almost honesty and careful distance, all the things they'd both been too afraid to say. "I don't want to leave," she said finally. Vittorio's eyes widened. "What?" "I don't want to leave. I should. Everything about this says I should take the money and run, but I don't want to." The confession came out raw. "And I don't know if that's because I actually want to stay, or because you've conditioned me to want it, or because I'm just broken now, but I don't want to go." "Lila, let me finish. I don't want to leave, but I can't stay like this. Circling you, pretending I don't feel things I shouldn't feel. Keeping distance because we're both too scared to close it." She looked up at him. "So if I stay, it has to be different. No more careful politeness. No more separate rooms and neutral conversations. If I stay, I'm staying all the way. As your wife. Your actual wife. Do you understand?" "Yes." His voice was barely above a whisper. "And if you can't give me that, if you want to keep me at arm's length for your conscience or whatever, then I need to leave. Because I can't keep doing this halfway thing. It's killing me." Vittorio reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and cupped her face in his hands. "I can give you that. I want to give you that. But Lila, you need to be sure. Because once we cross this line, there's no going back." "I know." "And you're sure, really sure. Stop asking me if I'm sure and just..." He kissed her before she could finish the sentence. Not tentative like last time, but certain, claiming, his hands in her hair, pulling her closer, and Lila kissed him back with 8 months of tension finally breaking. They stumbled backward until she hit the desk, paper scattering, and she didn't care. Didn't care about anything except the feel of him, the taste of him, the way he was looking at her like she was something precious instead of something purchased. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "I love you," Vittorio said. "I need you to know that. This isn't obligation or conditioning or anything else. I love you." "I know." Lila pulled him back down. "I know, and I think I might love you too. Even though I shouldn't. Even though it's probably crazy. Definitely crazy." "Good." She kissed him again. "I've had enough of saying." They made it to her room somehow, hands and mouths and whispered words she'd remember later but couldn't quite hear over the pounding of her heart. And when he finally carried her to bed, Lila didn't feel like a prisoner or a purchase or any of the things she'd been for the past 8 months. She felt like someone choosing, actually choosing, and that made all the difference. Afterward, they lay tangled together, and Lila traced patterns on his chest while he played with her hair. "What happens now?" she asked. "I don't know. What do you want to happen?" "I want you to stop asking me what I want and just tell me what you want." "I want this. You. All of it." He pulled her closer. "I want to wake up next to you. I want to stop pretending this is temporary. I want to build something real instead of something forced." "Okay." "Okay?" "Yeah." She looked up at him. "Let's build something real." He kissed her forehead, and Lila closed her eyes and tried not to think about how she'd gotten here. about her father or the attack or the fact that this had started with threats and torture equipment. None of that mattered right now. What mattered was this moment, this choice, this man who'd stolen her life and then given it back transformed. It wasn't forgiveness. Maybe it would never be forgiveness, but it was something, and for now, that was enough. The morning light came through windows that no longer felt like part of a cage, and Lila woke to find Vittorio already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What?" she asked, voice still rough with sleep. Just trying to figure out if last night was real. It was real. She stretched, feeling pleasantly sore in ways she hadn't expected. Unless we both had the same very detailed dream. That would be one hell of a coincidence. He traced a finger down her arm. Any regrets? She thought about it, really thought about it. A year ago, the answer would have been obvious. 6 months ago, too. But now? No, she said. No regrets. Which is either growth or Stockholm Syndrome, and I'm choosing to believe it's growth. I'll take it either way. They stayed in bed longer than they should have, talking about nothing and everything. And Lila realized this was the first morning in nearly a year where she didn't wake up feeling like a prisoner. The villa was still the same. The guards were still outside. Nothing had fundamentally changed about her situation. Except everything had. 2 weeks later, Lila was reviewing financial documents in Vittorio's study. Their study now, since she'd started involving herself in the legitimate business operations, when Marco knocked. "Mrs. DeLuca, there's someone here to see you." "Who?" "Your father." The paper slipped from her hands. "What?" "He showed up at the gate about 20 minutes ago. Says he needs to speak with you. Mr. DeLuca is on his way back from the city, but he wanted me to ask if you'd see him." Lila's first instinct was to say no, to tell Marco to send Richard Hayes away and never let him come back. But something stopped her, maybe curiosity, maybe the need for closure she hadn't known she wanted. "Where is he?" "In the front parlor, with 2 guards." "Good. Keep them there." She stood, smoothing her dress. "I'll see him, but only for 10 minutes. Richard Hayes looked older. That was the first thing Lila noticed when she walked into the parlor. He'd lost weight, his hair had gone grayer, and he had the kind of hollowed-out look that came from not sleeping well for a long time. He stood when she entered, and she saw his hands were shaking. "Lila, thank you for seeing me. You have 10 minutes. Use them wisely." She didn't sit, didn't make this comfortable for him. "You look good. Healthy." He seemed to struggle for words. "I was afraid. I didn't know if I was still alive, still in one piece." She crossed her arms. "Disappointed?" No, of course not. I just..." He ran a hand through his thinning hair. "I've been trying to get in touch for months. They wouldn't let me. Said you didn't want contact." "I didn't. Still don't, actually." "Lila, please, I know you're angry." "Angry?" She laughed, and it came out sharp. "Angry doesn't even begin to cover it. You sold me, traded me like property to save your own skin, and now you show up here expecting what? Forgiveness? Understanding?" "I expect nothing. I deserve nothing." His voice cracked. "But I needed to see you, to know you were okay. To tell me what? That you're sorry? That you didn't have a choice?" Lila moved closer, and she saw him flinch. "Good. I know you're sorry. I know you feel guilty, but that doesn't change what you did. Doesn't give me back the life you stole." I know that, but I need you to understand. I thought I was saving you. The Russos, they were going to kill me to get to you, because of your debts, your choices, your gambling problem that you hid for years." She could feel the anger rising, hot and clean. "You put me in danger and then called selling me to a crime lord protection. Do you understand how twisted that is?" "Yes." Tears were streaming down his face now. "Yes, I understand. I understand that I destroyed my daughter's life to save my own. I understand that you'll never forgive me. I understand that I deserve every bit of hatred you feel." "Then why are you here?" "Because you're still my daughter, and I needed to see that you were okay. Even if you hate me, even if you never want to see me again." He wiped his face with a shaking hand. "I know I don't deserve anything from you, but I'm begging, just tell me you're okay, that you're safe, that you have some kind of life here. Give me that much and I'll leave. I'll never contact you again. Lila looked at this man who'd raised her, taught her to ride a bike, helped her with homework, showed up to every school event. The man who'd also lied to her, betrayed her, and traded her freedom for his own survival. Both versions were true. Both versions were him. I'm okay, she said finally. I'm safe. And I have a life here that's nothing like what I planned, but is mine anyway. Are you happy? The question caught her off guard. What? Are you happy? Because if you're not, if he's hurting you or forcing you into things, I'll find a way to get you out. I'll go to the police, the embassy. I don't care what happens to me. Stop. The word came out harder than she intended. You don't get to play the protective father now. You lost that right when you brought me here. I know, but I need to know, please. Lila thought about the past year, about the fear and anger and confusion, about learning to fight, to speak Italian, to navigate a world she'd never wanted to be part of, about the attack and the aftermath and the complicated, messy thing between her and Vittorio that didn't fit into any neat category. I'm not unhappy, she said carefully. It's not the life I would have chosen, but it's the life I have, and I'm making something of it. That's the best I can give you. Richard nodded, relief and grief warring on his face. Okay, that's something. Your 10 minutes are up. Lila, wait, please, just one more thing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. I've been carrying this around for months, trying to find the courage to send it, but maybe you should just read it yourself. She took the envelope, suspicious. What is it? The truth, about everything. Things I should have told you years ago. He moved toward the door, then stopped. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't forgive myself. But I hope someday you can at least understand why I made the choices I made, even if they were the wrong ones. After he left, Lila stood there holding the envelope, feeling like she'd just survived a small earthquake. The guards had escorted Richard out, and she could hear cars pulling away, but she couldn't quite make herself move. That's how Vittorio found her 20 minutes later, still standing in the same spot. Marco told me he was here. Vittorio came to her side. Are you okay? I don't know. She looked at the envelope. He gave me this, said it was the truth about everything. Are you going to read it? Eventually, maybe. I don't know. She let him pull her close. He asked if I was happy. What did you tell him? That I'm not unhappy. Which is true, I think. But it's weird, right? A year ago, I would have said being here would destroy me. And instead, I'm telling my father I've made peace with it. Have you? Made peace with it? I'm trying to. She pulled back to look at him. But I need you to understand something. I'm choosing this, choosing you, but that doesn't erase how it started. Doesn't make what you did okay. I know. And there are going to be days when I'm angry about it, when I remember that girl on the plane and hate what happened to her, hate what we both did to her. I can live with that. Can you? Because it's easy to say now, but when I'm actually angry, when I'm throwing the past in your face, I'll still be here. He touched her face. Lila, I'm not under any illusions. I know what I did. I know I can't undo it. But I can spend the rest of my life trying to be worth the choice you're making now. If you'll let me. She kissed him instead of answering, because some things didn't need words. That night, after dinner, she finally opened the envelope. Vittorio offered to leave, to give her privacy, but she asked him to stay. Whatever was in there, she didn't want to face it alone. The letter was 20 pages long, handwritten, Richard's familiar scrawl covering both sides of each sheet. Lila read it slowly, and with each page, the full picture emerged. The gambling had started after her mother died. His way of coping with grief and loneliness. Small bets at first, then bigger ones. He'd won sometimes, enough to keep him hooked, but lost more. Borrowed from friends, then from banks, then from people who didn't use banks. The Russos had seemed like a solution. Quick money, reasonable terms. Until they weren't. He'd tried to fix it, tried to win it back, tried to borrow more, tried to sell everything he owned. Nothing worked. And when the Russos made it clear they'd hurt Lila to get to him, he'd panicked, reached out to every connection he had, looking for a way out. That's when someone mentioned Vittorio De Luca, a man powerful enough to protect against the Russos, a man who valued loyalty and family, a man who, rumor had it, wanted a wife. The letter didn't excuse what he'd done. Richard made that clear. He knew it was unforgivable, knew he'd traded his daughter's freedom for his own survival, but he genuinely believed it was the lesser evil, that being married to a powerful man was better than being tortured by the Russos. He'd been wrong. He knew that now. The last page was an apology, raw and honest, and a confession that he thought about her every day, that he'd changed his name, moved to a small town in Montana, and spent his time volunteering at an addiction recovery center, trying to help other people avoid the mistakes he'd made, trying to be worthy of a daughter who deserved better. Lila finished reading and carefully folded the letter back into the envelope. Her hands were steady, which surprised her. She'd expected tears or rage or something. Instead, she just felt tired. "What did it say?" Vittorio asked quietly. "The truth, like he promised." She set the letter aside. "He's broken. Has been for a long time. The gambling was just a symptom." "Does it change anything?" "No. Yes, I don't know." She leaned against him. "It makes him more human, which makes it harder to hate him. But it doesn't change what he did. You don't have to forgive him." "I know. But maybe someday I won't hate him either. Maybe someday I'll just feel nothing, and that'll be its own kind of peace." 3 months later, Rosa knocked on the bedroom door early one morning, her face pale. "Mrs. DeLuca, you should come to the bathroom." "What? Why?" "Just come, please." Lila followed her, confused, and found Rosa holding up a pregnancy test. 3 of them, actually, all showing the same result. "I found these in the trash," Rosa said. "Were you going to tell anyone?" Lila stared at the tests, her mind going blank. She'd suspected for a few weeks, the nausea, the fatigue, the way certain smells made her want to vomit. But suspecting and knowing were different things. "I was going to tell him tonight," she said faintly. "I just needed time to process it myself first." "How far along do you think you are?" "Maybe 2 months? I'm not sure." Lila sat on the edge of the tub, suddenly dizzy. "This is real. This is actually happening. How do you feel about it?" "Good question." Lila tried to sort through the tangle of emotions. Fear, definitely. Uncertainty. But also something else. Something that felt almost like anticipation. "Terrified," she said honestly. "But also, I don't know. Not unhappy?" "You should tell him. He'll want to know." "I know, She looked at the tests again. "A year ago, if someone had told me I'd be pregnant with Vittorio DeLuca's baby and not completely devastated about it, I would have called them insane. A lot can change in a year." "Yeah, clearly." She told him that evening after dinner when they were alone in the study. Just handed him the tests without preamble and watched his face transform from confusion to shock to something that looked like wonder. "You're pregnant." "Apparently." "How long have you known?" "Since this morning. Well, suspected for a few weeks, but confirmed this morning." She watched him carefully. "How do you feel about it?" He set the tests down carefully, like they were precious. "How do I feel?" "Lila, I'm 55 years old. I never thought I'd have children. Never thought I'd have a family. And now you're telling me—" His voice caught. "I'm terrified and thrilled and completely unprepared." "Join the club." He pulled her into his arms and she felt him shaking slightly. "We're really doing this. Building something real. Looks like it." She pulled back to look at him. "But I need to know you understand what this means. This isn't just about us anymore. There's going to be a child. A person who didn't choose any of this." "I know. And I need you to promise me something." Her voice was fierce. "This child will never be used, never be traded or sold or treated like property. Never be put in the position I was put in. I don't care what debts you owe or what enemies you make. Our child is off limits. Completely. I promise." He cupped her face. "Lila, I promise. On everything I have, everything I am, our child will be protected, loved, given every choice I took from you." "Okay?" She breathed out slowly. "Okay. Then I think we're really doing this." The pregnancy was harder than she expected. Morning sickness that lasted all day. Exhaustion that had her falling asleep in the middle of conversations. Mood swings that made her cry over the stupidest things. But through it all, Vittorio was there, bringing her crackers at 3 in the morning, rubbing her feet when they swelled, reading parenting books with the same intensity he brought to business deals. When she was 5 months along and starting to show, Lila made a decision. I want to see my father. Vittorio looked up from the crib he was assembling. Are you sure? No, but I think I need to. He should know about the baby, should have a chance to meet them, if he wants. She touched her stomach. I don't want my child to grow up with the same silence and resentment I had. What do you want me to do? Come with me, if you're willing. They flew to Montana 3 weeks later, Lila's doctor reluctantly approving the trip with strict instructions to take it easy. Richard lived in a small town called Whitefish, in a modest house that looked nothing like the upscale suburb where Lila had grown up. He answered the door looking even older than he had at the villa, and when he saw Lila's stomach, he actually started crying. You're pregnant. 5.5 months. She shifted uncomfortably. Can we come in? It's cold out here. Inside, the house was neat but sparse. Clearly, a place where someone lived but didn't really have a life. Richard made tea with shaking hands while Lila and Vittorio sat at a kitchen table that had seen better days. I didn't think I'd ever see you again, Richard said, setting down mugs. When Marco said you wanted to meet, I thought I was imagining things. I read your letter, all 20 pages. Lila wrapped her hands around the warm mug. It helped. Not enough to forgive, but enough to understand. That's more than I deserve. Probably, but I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for them. She touched her stomach. My child is going to have a grandfather. Maybe not a perfect one, but one who's trying to be better. If you want that, Richard's face crumpled. You'd let me be part of their life after everything? With conditions. You stay clean, no gambling, no debts, nothing that could put them in danger. You respect that Vittorio is my husband and their father, whether you like it or not. And you never, ever ask me to choose between you and them. Because I will choose them, every time. I understand. I accept all of it. He looked at Vittorio. I know you have every reason to hate me. I brought her to you like a transaction. But I need to know, are you treating her well? Is she safe? Is she happy? Vittorio met his eyes steadily. I'm treating her like she deserves to be treated. Like the strong, intelligent woman she is. Like my partner. Like the mother of my child. He took Lila's hand. And yes, she's safe. I'd burn down my empire before I'd let anyone hurt her. Even you? Especially me. They talked for 2 hours. Not about forgiveness or the past, but about the future. About the baby's due date. About what kind of grandparent Richard wanted to be, about how they'd make this complicated family work. It wasn't easy. There were tears and hard truths and moments where Lila wanted to leave, but they got through it. On the flight back, Vittorio asked, Are you okay? I think so. It's weird. I still don't forgive him, still angry about what he did, but I also don't want to carry that anger forever. Doesn't seem worth it. You're allowed to feel complicated things about complicated people. Yeah, I'm starting to figure that out. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Thank you for coming with me. Always. The baby came 3 weeks early, in the middle of the night, with all the drama Lila should have expected. Vittorio drove like a maniac to the hospital, barking orders at anyone who got in their way, and stayed by her side through 14 hours of labor that felt more like 14 years. When their daughter finally arrived, screaming and red-faced and absolutely perfect, Lila watched Vittorio hold her for the first time and saw him completely break down. She's so small, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. I'm going to drop her. I'm going to break her. You're not going to drop her. Lila was crying too, exhausted and elated and terrified. You're doing fine. What if I'm a terrible father? What if I mess this up? Then you'll figure it out, like we've figured out everything else. She touched their daughter's tiny hand. What should we name her? They'd been arguing about names for months, unable to agree. But looking at her now, Lila knew exactly what felt right. Elena, she said, after your mother. Vittorio looked at her with such raw emotion that she almost started crying again. Are you sure? I'm sure. She should have a name that means something, that honors where she comes from. Elena De Luca. He tested it out. Welcome to the world, little one. I promise to do better by you than I did by your mother. The first few months were chaos. Neither of them knew what they were doing, and Elena had opinions about everything: feeding times, sleeping schedules, the temperature of her bath. Lila stumbled through it in a haze of exhaustion and hormones, while Vittorio read every parenting book he could find and still looked terrified every time he picked up his daughter. But they figured it out. Slowly, messily, with plenty of mistakes and tears and moments of pure panic. They figured it out. Richard visited when Elena was 3 months old, and Lila watched him hold his granddaughter with the kind of careful reverence that spoke of second chances and hard-won wisdom. He came back every few months after that, always respectful, always grateful, slowly becoming the kind of grandfather Elena deserved. 2 years after Elena was born, Lila woke up one morning and realized something had shifted. She'd stopped counting the days since she'd arrived at the villa, stopped thinking of herself as a prisoner who'd adapted, started thinking of herself as someone who'd chosen this life, this man, this family. It wasn't the life she'd planned, would never be the life she'd planned, but it was hers. She found Vittorio in his study, working through papers, and came up behind him to wrap her arms around his shoulders. "I love you," she said. He turned in his chair to look at her. "What brought this on?" "Nothing. Everything. I just realized I don't say it enough." She kissed him. "I love you. Even though how we started was wrong, even though I shouldn't, even though it makes no sense, I love you. I love you too." He pulled her into his lap. "Every day I wake up amazed that you're still here, that you chose to stay. Where else would I go? This is my home. You're my home." She touched his face. "Besides, someone has to keep you from spoiling Elena rotten." "I don't spoil her. You bought her a pony last week. She's 2. She needs to learn to ride eventually. She needs to learn to walk without falling over first." But Lila was smiling. "You're ridiculous. You love it." "Yeah, I do." That afternoon, they took Elena to one of the schools Vittorio funded, the same one he'd shown Lila years ago, now with a new wing and updated computers. Elena toddled around the courtyard while children played, and Lila watched Vittorio talk to the teachers with the same intensity he brought to everything. This was who he was: criminal and philanthropist, violent and gentle, the man who'd forced her into marriage and the man who'd given her the freedom to leave. All of it true. All of it him. She learned that people weren't simple, weren't good or bad, monster or saint. They were just human, making choices, living with consequences, trying to be better than they were yesterday. Vittorio had been making that effort for years now, slowly dismantling the most dangerous parts of his empire, shifting to legitimate businesses, preparing for a future where Elena wouldn't inherit violence. It wasn't fast, and it wasn't perfect, but it was happening. When Elena was 3, Lila found out she was pregnant again. This time, it didn't come as a shock. They'd been talking about it, planning for it. But when she told Vittorio, his reaction was the same as the first time: wonder and terror in equal measure. "We're doing this again," he said, holding the positive test. "Apparently. You okay?" "I'm terrified. Elena's already running circles around me. How am I supposed to handle 2 of them? The same way we've handled everything else. Together. Messily. With lots of coffee and very little sleep." Their son arrived 8 months later, easier than Elena had been, and they named him Marco, after the man who'd protected Lila during the attack and become one of their closest friends. With 2 children and a life that felt more real than anything she'd imagined, Lila finally did the thing she'd been putting off for years. She went through the papers Vittorio had given her, the ones granting her financial independence, and signed them over to a trust for Elena and Marco. "What are you doing?" Vittorio asked, watching her with the lawyer. "Making sure they're protected, always, no matter what happens to either of us." She looked at him. "You gave me freedom. I'm giving them security. You don't have to do this." "I know, but I want to. This way, if something happens, if your past catches up to you or if things go wrong, they'll be okay. They'll have choices. The kind I didn't have." Years passed. Elena grew into a fierce, intelligent girl who asked too many questions and argued with everyone. Marco was quieter, more observational, but just as stubborn in his own way. They fought and played and drove their parents crazy in the way all children did. Lila taught them Italian and English, took them to museums and concerts, made sure they understood that privilege came with responsibility. Vittorio taught them to be strong, to think critically, to to question everything. Together, they built a family that defied every expectation anyone had for them. When Elena was 7, she asked the question Lila had been dreading. "Mama, why don't you ever talk about how you and Papa met?" They were in the garden, planting flowers, Marco digging in the dirt nearby. Lila's hands paused on the trowel. "It's complicated, sweetheart." "That's what you always say when you don't want to explain something." Smart kid. Too smart sometimes. "You're right. I'm sorry." Lila sat back on her heels. "Your father and I met in a way that wasn't typical. It wasn't like fairy tales where people fall in love at first sight. It was harder than that. More complicated. Did you not like him at first?" "No, I was very angry at him, actually." "Why?" "Because he made choices that affected my life. Took away some of my choices." "How did you explain this to a 7-year-old? But over time, we learned to understand each other, to work together, to build something good out of a bad beginning." "So you do love him now?" "Very much." "And he loves you?" "Yes." "Then that's all that matters, right?" Elena went back to planting with the simple logic of childhood. "Uncle Marco says you and Papa are the strongest couple he knows. He says you survived things most people wouldn't. Uncle Marco talks too much." But that night, lying in bed with Vittorio beside her, Lila thought about Elena's words. That's all that matters. Love, choice, survival. Maybe it was that simple after all. "What are you thinking about?" Vittorio asked, half asleep. "That we did it. Built something real out of something wrong. That's not nothing. It's everything." He pulled her closer. "You're everything." 10 years after that first terrible day at the villa, Lila stood on the same balcony where she'd once plotted escape and looked out at gardens where her children played. The villa had changed. More security, yes, but also more warmth. Photos on the walls, toys scattered in corners, the sound of laughter instead of just silence. She'd changed too. 29 now, no longer the frightened 19-year-old who'd stepped off that plane. Stronger. Harder in some ways. Softer in others. Someone who'd learned that survival wasn't just about enduring, but about choosing what kind of life to build from the wreckage. Vittorio joined her on the balcony, gray threading heavier through his hair now, but still strong. Still here. "Remember this view?" he asked. "How could I forget? I spent hours out here trying to figure out how to escape." "Did you ever find a way?" "Several, actually. Never used them." "Why not?" "Because somewhere along the way I stopped wanting to escape and started wanting to stay." She leaned against him. "That doesn't make how it started right. It never will be. But it makes what we built real. I know I can't give you back what I took, the choices, the freedom, the life you would have had. No, you can't. But you gave me something else, a different life, a different future. Not better or worse, just different." She looked up at him. "And I chose it. Really chose it. That matters. It's everything." They stood there as the sun set over the Italian countryside, and Lila thought about the girl on the plane. That version of herself felt impossibly distant now, like a character in someone else's story. Maybe she was. Maybe that girl had died somewhere between the threats and the wedding, and someone new had been born in her place. Someone who understood that people were complicated, that love didn't follow rules, that you could hate how something started and still embrace where it led. Someone who'd learned that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, but it did mean choosing not to let the past define the future. Someone who'd survived the worst thing that ever happened to her and built a life worth living anyway. Elena called from the garden, wanting help with something, and Lila went to her daughter without hesitation. This was her life now. These were her choices. This was the family she'd built from ashes and anger and unexpected love. It wasn't the fairy tale, wasn't the happy ending tied up with a neat bow, but it was hers. And that made it perfect in all its messy, complicated, hard-won beauty. Years later, when people asked how she and Vittorio met, Lila would smile and say it was complicated, which was true. But what she wouldn't say, what she carried in her heart, was simpler. They'd met wrong, stayed for complicated reasons, and somewhere in between, built something that proved even the darkest beginnings could lead to light. Not because the darkness didn't matter, not because the wrong became right, but because they chose, every day, to be more than how they started. And in the end, that choice was everything.